I always like to be before time rather than, full time. Yes. Great. I think we can start probably.
Great.
Hello, everyone. My name is Piyush. I'm the creative director of Handmade in Britain. Because of this pandemic, we started this initiative called Handmade Interact. As you know, that we have been working with a lot of artists over a period of years. And this is one of our initiatives so that we take you to the studios of the artists where they are still working on their own, not able to do any of the shows which have been canceled. So today we have Annie Ruthven-Taggart. Annie has been showing with Handmade in Britain, my God, for 12 years or something?
Oh my God, it's about 12 years.
Oh God, exactly. So
I'm feeling old now. Yeah.
So today, Annie would be showing us some of her amazing work, which she's selling on her platform as well, online platform. And also she showcases during the events, which she does with us, Oxford and Chelsea. Over to you, Annie.
Right, hi. Yes, hi everybody, welcome to this webinar event. And I think probably the best way to start it is to show you around my studio. This is the studio. I work from home, which is really nice. There's no commuting, which obviously at the moment is really good. And so this is my space. This is my sort of design area where I do designing and making. And this is the main sort of tool area, which is actually not normally as tidy as this. I don't want you guys to get the wrong idea. But it's tidied up for you today. So this is where I do all the making of my jewellery as well. And then moving over here, this area here is where I do all the soldering and heating of shapes. And I've got my acid there, and my sonic cleaner, and my polishes. So this is more, the dangerous side, as my daughter used to say when she was little. And I quite like to move around my workroom. I know lots of jewelers do sit in one place for soldering and filing, but I quite like to just get up and move and have different areas where I do different parts of the work. So moving on from this bit, this area is the polishing. And then this here is the fly press, which I'm going to be showing you how to use today. So the fly press is probably, I'm sure some of you are familiar with them, and probably some of you thinking, what on earth is that? Well, this is one of the first bits of kit I got when I started up about 25 years ago. This is a long time ago now. And I bought it from a factory in Kent that was closing down. And they're very old bits of kit. They don't make them anymore. So this one was, I think, built in about 1930. So it's very old, and it's still brilliant at doing the job that it's done right from the beginning. So it's a fabulous bit of kit. It's incredibly heavy. When we brought it back from the factory, I think it definitely killed up the back of our car. It was never the same again. When I moved into this house, I remember the removal guys going, yeah, I just take that upstairs. And I was like, I don't think so. And it took 3 guys to carry it upstairs. So it's bolted down, the bench is bolted to the wall. It has a lot of force behind it. There is a crack, but we won't tell the neighbours about that. And basically, it's the idea of a fly press is that you have the weight at the top, which spins around, I suppose in a flying action, but obviously in control. And this is connected to a metal shaft with a screw, and this brings down a pressure with the plates. And that is what's going to force the metal through to make our shapes I'm going to demonstrate. So it's a very, it's quite an ingenious bit of kit. It's very sturdy. This is a stop, so you can indicate how deep you want to go when you're fly pressing. But yeah, it's great. So that's probably my most well-loved piece of equipment in here. So that's what I'm going to be showing you today. So I think what we're going to do, I'm going to go back over here because I wanted to talk you through how I get to the fly pressing stage and how I actually produce my shapes using that machine. So I think probably the first thing to talk about is what starts with the work, what inspires me. I'm very inspired by marine life, by organic shapes. There's lots of, Ben got here on the wall, there's lots of things on the wall here that kind of give me inspiration and design ideas. So I start off by looking at sort of shapes and forms. I suppose I'm inspired by shell shapes, by pebbles. And I start off by doing drawings and paintings that you see here on the bench. And I'm not actually directly translating the shapes of the shells or of the pebbles, I'm being inspired and actually abstracting them. So I like to think they start the design off, and then I kind of launch on from there into more unusual shapes. So you can see the influence, but you hopefully can't go, well, but hopefully you can't go, well, that's a shell or that's a pebble. So it's just an inspiration point to launch the collection. So I think it's fair to say my work is very three-dimensional. I don't really work on the flat, never have done. Like to create forms, create shapes. I do a lot of tests with maquettes and card that I do once I've done the drawings, and then I start quite quickly working into metal, doing shapes. These are fly press shapes that I'm going to demonstrate to you later on. So what I'm basically saying is that I go quite quickly into 3 dimensions. And here's a range of the pieces which in my recent collection, which
Annie, I think we've lost you for a minute. Oh, you're back. You're back now.
Have I gone?
You're back now.
Oh, I'm back now. I went there. Okay. So yes, so where I got lost. Yes, so I like to translate not only the shapes but also the lines on work. So looking at the pebbles, the lines that you get on the shells as well, and translating them onto the textures of the beads. So this particular necklace here, this has a milled-in texture, echoing sort of water over pebbles. That's the direction that is going in. And this particular shape's been used in a range of necklaces. And when I do the shapes, I'm very influenced by colour. And I like to actually incorporate and use beads and stones which enhance the shapes and add another dimension as well. So I suppose there's quite a lot going on with my work. And the pebble shapes, I try and source necklaces which very much link with the shapes I'm producing. So this particular Jasper necklace here has these wonderful, this was quite a find. You don't often get shapes which really link up well with your work in terms of the striations in the actual pebbles. So it's sort of, it's luck of the draw as well with stones. I have stone dealers and I say, can you source me this? But it's luck and as to whether they can find which is why I did the fly pressing, because that's a way of pressing out 2 hard shapes, soldering together and getting a sense of volume without the weight. Because if you can imagine, if these pieces were solid, it would be mighty heavy. So they're actually pressed out of quite thin sheet metal, so about 0.5 thickness of metal, or 0.4 even. So that is why the fly pressing is brilliant for all the things that I do. So another good thing about the fly pressing, why I chose to specialize in it from college, was that it is a wonderful way of being able to texture your metal first and then press it out. Because when you press it out, you don't interfere with the surface of the metal at all. So if you come in closely in here, Ben, if you see this is an earring which has got gold dust and gold wires on it. Now all that decoration was put on the metal before I pushed out the shape. And then you push out the shape and it is not at all touched. And I'm going to explain that earlier, because it's obviously much more difficult to push out a shape and apply something on a curved surface. It's much more difficult to do. So if by fly pressing, you can develop a technique where everything is done first and then it's pushed out. Okay, so that's another real plus for the technique that I'm going to show you today. So I think Ben's going to, these are earrings, which, so either the shapes are double-sided, so they're 2 halves together, like on the necklace, or I use one shape and flat back it, and so obviously for the earrings, because you don't want too much volume on your ears. There we go, and then I use various precious stones as well to enhance the shapes and sort of to lift them. So that's all the design side of things. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring you over to here. Because of the light, if I stand where I normally stand, I'd be in total darkness. So I'm going to show you exactly how we get something to this sort of shape, which is a brooch. Now again, this is an example of a brooch where all this decoration, all the etched texture, and all the gold overlay was done on it in the flat, and then it was punched out. So much more controlled, and everything adheres very well. So, so this particular brooch was produced out of a shape like this out of wood. So basically, when you're using the fly press, you need 3 important things. Obviously, fly press being one of them. You need a piece of wood to cut out your shape. So I use MDF. I don't use very much of it, but MDF is brilliant because you can file it, you can drill it, you don't get splinters. It's really easy to carve, and so it's a very good material to work with for this. And also, when you use the fly press, it doesn't stamp. You can use perspex when you do fly pressing, but it often does crack because of the pressure of the metal plates. So the MDF is perfect material for doing this sort of thing. So when you're starting out, you first of all get your MDF and you draw your shape on it, okay, like that. You then have to cut out your shape from the MDF, and this cutout is where your metal is going to be pushed through to get your shape. Now, the way you cut it out, I'm sure there are lots of jewelers listening who know, probably thinking, ooh, that's quite easy. But some of you who are not jewelers, I'm just going to quickly explain that when you want to cut out a shape within, you have to drill a hole, and then we have piercing saws like this, which have blades on them, and you can thread in your shape like that and actually cut it out. So you can actually access the interior of the block without cutting from the outside. So you would then at your bench be able to cut through. Okay, so that's the brilliant use of the piercing saw. So now when you're making out your stamps, if you're making a left and right, which I would be, if I was making this pendant, I'm just going to pop back over here and get this pendant off there. If I was making this particular pendant, again, it's made out of two halves that are soldered together. So it would have to have been initiated by these two, a left and a right of the shape, which are soldered together to make the hollow shape. Now, if you're just making one shape like that and you're just flat backing it, then you don't have to worry about the stamp being the same on both sides, okay? Because you're not creating a left and a right. But something like this, where you want a bead with 2 pieces together, you've got to make sure that when you cut through this, you don't cut an angle. It has to be really, really straight. And this side has to match that side so that they pair up. Because if they don't meet, it's a complete nightmare, because then you're filling holes, and then if you have to fill it, dribbles of solder goes on the surface. I'm sure jewelers will think, oh, that's a complete nightmare. And then you don't want anything going on the surface because you've got your lovely texture, which would all be ruined. So everything's got to meet. So basically, this technique, you have to be really accurate. And the next stage is only as good as the stage before. So I say that when I do workshops as well, that if you start off with inaccuracies, they just build and build and build. So this is an example where, again, that would happen. So we've cut our shape. If anyone's thinking, what on earth is she talking about, let me know. If there are any questions, or if anyone is thinking, where are we going with this? Well, hang in there. It'll become clear in a minute. So we've got our shape cut out. You then have to cut out your metal. Now, when you first try out a piece, you would normally do it in a base metal like copper, okay, or brass or something, so that because often it doesn't always work first time. It can be a bit hit and miss when you fly press. So you want to make sure the 2 halves meet, that the impression is right, that it's deep enough, etc. So you would always cut out a piece of metal to go over your hole, which has to be slightly bigger than the actual shape, because you've got to allow for a flange of metal, because when the metal is pushed through the shape, I think that's the other side, yeah. When the metal is pushed through the shape, there has to be a margin going round to stop the whole shape imploding, okay? So you need that excess metal, because the press is going to push down inside your shape to create the shape that you cut out of wood. And if you don't have extra metal, it will just all it'll all sort of sink in. So never be too mean about your metal, because otherwise it's just a wasted stamp, and you can't use it. So once you've done your tryouts in your base metal, you can then go into your silver, which obviously is more expensive when you make mistakes. So you want to make any mistakes really in that metal. Now, one thing I should also mention is that when you're stamping out, you not only need your block and your metal, but you also need to make a little rubber. You need to make a little rubber positive of your shape. And this is going to be used to help push the shape through the mold like that. So you need an impression. And the way that you do this is you cut them out of flexible rubber that you can buy. I think I bought this years ago. There's a great shop, Pentonville Rubber Company. I probably don't know if anyone knows that, but it's brilliant. It sells all thicknesses of rubbers and stuff. And that is the perfect place to go and buy the rubber that you need. And this is quite soft. It's easy to cut out with a piercing saw. It's easy to file and shape. And it's, yeah, so every little stamp that I've ever done, all of them have little rubber molds that match, little positive shapes that match all the shapes that I've done. And this is some of the shapes over the years that I have done. Each one has its own little stamp. So, yeah, Piyush, any questions?
I have 3 questions, actually, yes.
Yeah,
so,
far away.
I thought, because it is related to what you have just said, it's very interesting. So Anna is...
Hello. Oh, is Piyush gone?
Oh, sorry. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me?
I can hear you now, yeah.
Okay. So Anna is asking, how is that press machine called? Is it a fire press? Because she could not hear the name perfectly well.
Oh, right, yeah. The press is a fly press. Now, my press machine, Ben wants to just flip to it in the corner, is called a fly press, and it's a very old-fashioned one. You can get more modern presses. You can get hydraulic presses, which are sort of bench size and are about the size of small rolling mills. And they're fine, but they don't have the oomph of a really old-fashioned press with an old-fashioned weight at the top. So if you can get hold of one of those, it's best a fly press. But a hydraulic press, you can. But I think you get a hydraulic press from Walsh's. They sell them, and they work on hydraulic presses work on a principle on hydraulic pressure. Which you use to pump up car tires. So it has that compression that works on the same principle, but it doesn't have the weight behind it of an old-fashioned iron fly press. But yes, they're hard to get hold of, and they do come in all different sizes, but they sell them on eBay, and you can get, I think, God, I mean, I bought mine 20 odd years ago and it was 40 quid. I think you could probably pick one up now for about £100 if you really wanted to get one. And they're great. So yeah. So was there another question, Piyush?
Yes. So Anna Maria and Chusey, they want to know, what is the rubber company called again?
The rubber company where you buy your rubber, I've had this a long time, it's called Pentonville Rubber Company. And it's in Pentonville Road, in Clerkenwell, in Angel. Yeah, it's in Angel. And they've been there for years. I'm sure they're still there, the Pentonville Rubber Company. Overwhelming smell when you go in of rubber. It's quite overbearing. I mean, they sell it like I think I bought a piece that big, so I still have it. There's a minimum amount. So yeah, if you want to buy it with some friends, that's kind of the way to go. But yeah, so that's where you get that from. Is that it? The question to time? Was there another one, Piyush?
I think for now it's good. And good. Actually, the type of rubber. What is the type of rubber?
Oh, well, this is a medium density rubber, a medium density black rubber. It's not a foam, because I know they also do foam. So it's a medium one. You need one that you can actually flex. And this is about 1 centimeter thick. You can get it really thick. I remember, I think this was from college. Oh gosh, college days. Don't buy it that thick, because yes, when you pinch a bit of rubber from college, you never use it. So that's a lesson to be learned. So yeah, it's about 1 centimeter thick. So it's just black standard rubber that has a little bit of give in it, but isn't too rubbery. If it compresses too easily, then it's not going to have enough resistance for the press. But yeah, as I say, it was a long time ago that I got that. Okay, right. So so moving on, these are the rubber shapes that I've cut out, which you need to go in the shapes in order to make the impression, because you not only have to cut a shape out, which is the shape of which is the same shape as you eventually, you also need a piece of rubber as well to go on top. And I'm going to explain the two different why you need both of these. This, you're probably thinking, oh, that's really thin. Well, I actually cut a piece of that in half, because if the rubber is too thick, it will take ages to make the impression. So what I want to do today is actually show you how to press out shape. So what I've got here is I've got one of my shapes that I'm just designing at the moment. This is for a earring. And I've cut this out of the MDF. I've made a little shape here, which is quite cute, which is going to be the impression to help it go through. And I'm going to use a little bit of this thin rubber as well to help it through. So here's one I did earlier, but I am going to show you how to actually do it. I'm not just going to stand here and just show you things I've done. So this is one that I did press out, okay, out of here. And this shows that that went through there, the press came down, it pushed that out, and it pushes out your shape like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to press out the other side of it. And I've cut out a couple of shapes here. And first of all, what we're going to do is we're going to just slightly anneal the metal just to soften it a little bit. Now the metal I'm using is silver, which probably, as you all know, comes in sheets. You can get different types of silver. You can get sterling, you can get fine, all different types of silver. I'm using fine silver here for a couple of reasons. Partly because a fine silver has a higher percentage of silver in it, so it's quite soft. It doesn't have any copper in it, or it's like 99.9% silver. If you use standard sterling silver, which probably a lot of you use already, it's 925, so it's 7.5% copper, so that it's not quite as soft as fine. I'm using fine because if you come up close, you'll notice that I've put a texture on these already in the rolling mill. And texturing is probably something for another day to show you how to do. But this works particularly well in fine silver. And also the fly pressing works quite well in fine silver as well. Now some of you who are jewelers may think, why is she annealing it if it's all fine silver? Well, because it's been through the rolling mill and I put that texture on it, it's very slightly hardened. So in order to make sure that the stamp really works, I'm going to just anneal it behind me just for a few minutes, just to soften the metal a little bit and to make sure the demonstration works. So if Ben wants to come over here, I'm just going to anneal on this side of the rim. Okay. Now, some of you, this is a normal small toe torch. You can use, you have even smaller ones you can get from Cookson's as well. It doesn't have to be this size. And what I'm going to do is just very gently anneal this metal, not too hot, because the metal's quite thin, because I've already put it to the rolling mill. And I'm just going to pop it. And just now what this is doing, it's softening the metal. So when you heat metal, the molecules in the metal move apart, they create spaces. It's getting a bit sciencey and technical now, and that allows the structure of the metal to be more flexible. It's very hot, so I'm going to just quench it in here. As soon as it goes, you can touch it. Okay, now, so those two pieces are what's called annealed, so they're nice and soft, extra soft, so that I know that hopefully the pressing should work, she says. If I was using sterling silver, they would oxidize, so they would go a blacky color, and I would have to put them in the acid over here. There's another reason why I've not done it, because I'm already waiting for that to happen. So I thought it would be better just to use the fine. So these two, nice and soft, quite very bendy, so they're all ready to put through the fire press. So I'm going to take my stamp. I'm going to check that I'm actually going to stamp out the right half, because I don't want to have two right sides. So that's definitely that side. So I'm going to put my silver in the middle there, like that. And I'm going to use a little bit of masking tape to keep it down, so that when I put it under the press, it doesn't all shift around, which would be a little bit annoying. So we're going to make sure that that isn't going to isn't going to go anywhere. That should be fine like that. And then I'm going to go to the press. I'm going to take my little square of rubber. I'm going to take a little piece of rubber. I'm just going to take you over to the fly press in the corner. Okay. And I'm going to pop our little stamp under there. I'm going to use this old metal block, which I've used for years and years. And in between, I'm just going to first of all start the impression by using the plain square of rubber. It would be too much to put that straight on there and push that down. The metal might go, ooh, too quickly. So I'm just going to very gently make a first impression, and then I'm going to go in there with my little shape. So I'm going to put the rubber on there, and I'm going to get my block there and center it up. And then it doesn't need much pressure. Yeah. Okay.
No, you were paused for a minute, so I thought I just wanted to check if your internet connection was okay.
Okay. Okay. I'm just going to push it a little bit further.
Pause for
Pull through.
I would do it again now.
Is it working? Are we online again? Okay. Right. So I'm just going to wind that down. Okay. And it's just very slightly made a little impression. It's very small, very small. So I'm going to get my little shape. See, that has told me that, it's probably quite hard to see in this slide, that the impression has started to be made. So I'm going to get my little shape and put it in there. And then I'm going to get my block and holding it. Just going to very gently see how that's going. It's better to go slowly rather than wind it down. And then I'm just going to take off the shape and I'm going to flatten the sides a little bit. Okay. And can you see it starts to make the shape? So I'm going to peel it off and I'm going to think, is that deep enough? So you can have a little look. Can you see it starting to come through? And I'm thinking, well, it's not as deep as the other one, so I'm probably going to put that down a little bit further. It's better to go gradually rather than whiz it round and bang it through, because it can just crack right through the metal. And then that's a little bit annoying. So we're just going to very gently push it down a little bit more. Good. And then I'm going to put the block on, because when you first put it down, can you see the edges start to come up? And that's why you need the extra metal, because if you don't have the metal to coat with that, it just implodes inside the shape. So I then take the rubber out and I use the block on its own. And there we go. And so there's our shape. So this will end up being the other half of that one. Okay, so I will cut those two out and they can be soldered together. We'll reach over for these, like these two were. So you'd end up with that, and then these two pieces can be soldered together, and then you would end up with your shape like that. Okay, so this pair is probably going to end up being a pair of earrings, so I may cut them out and just flat back them. But yeah, hopefully get them on the site sometime in the next week or two. So are there any questions? How did that make sense for everybody? Are there any questions? It's hot in here.
What is the thickness of the silver you're using?
Yeah, the thickness of the silver I used, I start off with 0.6. That's 0.6 of a millimeter. And the reason why I started with 0.6 is that I have put a texture on it, and that brings it down to about 0.5. And then I push it through. So if you want to fly press out without texturing your metal, just kneading it and using it as is, just go for 0.5. But you've got to allow for anything you're going to do to the metal beforehand. So something like this, which was actually etched and the gold was soldered on, I started off with about 0.7, I think, for that, because I was etching into the metal, and then where you solder on your gold, it does stress the metal. When you push it through, those parts of the metal where you have things soldered onto them find it harder to move. So there's always that bit of tension, and you don't want the metal to crack where you've soldered or overlaid something there. So, but on the whole, I would say yes, particularly in fine silver, you can do 0.6 or 0.5, and yes, 0.5 in normal sterling silver. Yeah, and then you're all probably thinking, well, no, you may be thinking, but in case you are thinking, once I've cut them out, there's going to be quite a lot of wastage of metal. So you do end up with a lot of spare sort of edges. And what you can do with those, you can either collect with your scrap, as jewelers know, or you can actually melt it all down and put it through your rolling mill. So there's nothing wasted. So it all goes back into the processes and starts again. So it's a great way of getting volume in your work. Actually, I quite like the idea of making something completely three-dimensional, soldering it together. And I think it just gives a form to everything that I do. So that's how a lot of the shapes which have been created that are on the site, the work that I'm selling on the site at the moment. So if we come back over here, you can see, you're probably thinking, So things like earrings, like the topaz earrings over here, these were actually made by a left and a right shape, and then I flat backed. So this flat back them on the back there. Now that's got a little hole in it, you'll see. A lot of fly press work generally has to have holes in, because if you solder things up without a hole, they can explode, because there's nowhere for the work for the air to come out. So there always has to be a little hole at the back. Also, if you're using fine silver, it's a little softer when you solder, and often if there's nowhere for it to go, the whole thing can just stretch out of shape. So that's something you've got to think about. So lots of holes, having to syringe out things, but you get used to it. But often lots of people say to me, why does your work have a hole in the back? Well, that is why. Couple of times I've risked it and not put a hole in the back, and it's always been good. So learnt my lesson on that one. And yes, a lot of these shapes I create different sizes. That's obviously the bigger one. This is the littler shape. The little shapes for the earrings I also translate to use for the catches on the necklace. Quite big on catches. I think catches are really important on necklaces, because a lot of people have short hair. Starting to wish I had short hair now. It's so hot in here. And you see the back of the catch, and I think it's all part of the integrity of the whole piece. So it looks like one unit as well. So yeah, so that's how it all, the processes. So, Piyush, is there anything else? I hope everyone's understood that, or it's sort of.
We have quite a few questions, yes, but I think I can take it forward. If you are showing some of the pieces, I think that would be good, because somebody has just asked, what stone is it in the earrings? Is it blue topaz? Because you were showing this beautiful earrings.
Yeah. These are topazes. These earrings here, which is the same as the little pendant here. So yeah. This is a blue topaz, which is a lovely sort of light summery stone. This one here, these are citrines there. Yeah, these are amethyst. Obviously, everyone knows they're amethysts. Again, this is quite a nice chunky necklace, but again, quite light. Even though it looks quite heavy, it is quite light, because as you say, the forms are quite hollow. The beads have a certain weight, but they're still, when you put a large necklace on, all the weight kind of dissipates around your neck, so you don't really feel the weight at all. And these are a jasper. These ones here, which are a really nice turquoisey color. A lot of the finishes, I've left these beads polished. Some of my work I polish, some I leave frosted. This has a I tend to leave the shapes that I've pressed highly polished, and the other way around for these. I think it's quite nice having the contrast between the two finishes, which is good. So I get a lot of people who see things that I've made, and I think recently when I was at a show, actually it wasn't that recent, it was quite long ago now, considering how long we've been at home, but when I was last at a show, I had a lady who came up to me and she said, I had this wonderful, string of jaspers. can you take them and then translate them into a necklace with your shapes? And that's something I do quite a lot. People recycling things that they have, or they have something sentimental, they have stones in a ring that are sentimental, and then you take them out and you put them in with your own shape. So it's often quite nice. And in terms of design, it's quite nice to be challenged, to use someone else's beads and gemstones, but not ones you'd normally buy to go with your work, but they've seen it going, and then you try and make it work. And it's quite good. It stretches your parameters and your design ability, and that's not a bad thing. So you don't get stuck in a rut designing just the things you want to do. So I quite enjoy doing that, actually, having a challenge. So that's good for jewelers, I think, definitely. But yeah. So how are we doing on this hot afternoon? So yes, please.
Sorry, should I ask some questions, or you are explaining?
Yeah,
something?
let's fire the questions. Yeah, that would be lovely.
So we have quite a lot. So one of the questions is, how long have you been making jewelry, which you didn't cover? Yes, you've been doing the shows for 12 years, but how long have you been?
Yeah. Okay, yeah, I mean, known you for 12 years, but I started out in 1995. So I've been making jewelry for 25 years. Ooh. So as soon as I left college, I set up Artgems jewelry. I did work for a jeweler part-time when I was training, and then I set up at home in my own studio. So yes, I trained at Sir John Cass School of Art, which I think doesn't exist anymore. I think it's now London Guildhall, and now it's something else. But it was a great place to train. I trained on a silversmithing course as well, which I think is probably why my work is quite sculptural. I started working actually really big when I was at college, and so my work's got smaller and smaller. But the techniques that I was shown by my silversmithing tutor, I still use in my jewelry: soldering techniques, shaping techniques. And I think it's very good for all jewelers to work big, and if they want then come down in size. It's really nice to have that balance and the ability to bring your skills down as well. So it was very much a silversmithing course first of all that I was on, which was great. Yeah, 4 years did fly past. So yeah. So are there any other questions, Piyush?
Many questions. Be ready.
I'm ready.
So one of the questions, I think two people have asked similar question, is like, can you make shapes with straight edges and corners using this process? And I think Jenny Ball has also asked this question. Is there a reason for sewing the silver to a slightly larger shape rather than leaving it square and cutting off the excess later?
So you mean actually, you could do square shapes. You could do shapes that have corners, definitely. I have done all sorts of shapes. Not everything has to be curved. Mine works for organic, but this is a piece that I made recently, which was fly pressed out, and I've had quite sharp corners on the, well, not sharp, but pointy corners on the edge. And this is a piece which was flat faced. So yes, you can do. I mean, when I look at my stamps over here, just thinking, not everything has curve. I got a commission from a priest. This is a while back, to do a cross, and that had to all be, although the actual cross was bulged out, it had pointy edges. So I think, yeah, you can. It doesn't have to be all completely curved. You can, whatever you cut out in your shape, you can. You can push through, like here. I pushed through a leaf shape like that. So it doesn't all have to be organic and pebbly shaped, because not everybody. Some people like corners, definitely, and more geometric shapes. So you just tailor the technique to your designs, and perhaps you'd have a curved base. You could cut out a square, which square front. You have balance.
Okay,
so, yeah.
You froze there for a minute. For what I think they wanted to know that the shape which you're making, you are cutting a shape which is a little bit larger than that, but can you cut a square shape, and can you create a shape what you're creating as well, like an organic shape out of a square shape? What is the reason you are creating, when you were cutting the fine silver, it was not in a square shape, but it was in a shape which was larger than the shape you were cutting it.
Oh, you mean, was it, what you mean in these shapes, the larger shape here? Do you mean leaving the actual edges on around the sides?
Correct.
Or,
yeah. So can this shape be a square shape, and then you are taking, you're making another shape?
yeah, I mean, what you can actually cut a shape out of it. Is that what you mean on the surface? I mean, not quite sure. So what? Perhaps you can say that again, Piyush. Yeah. What do you mean? So if you did a square shape, you cut a square hole out of your
No.
wood, you would push it through and it would be cushion shaped. But the actual when you cut it out, it would have the four corners on the edge. I'm trying to think of square shape. This is somebody who wants to make something geometric. I'm thinking here. Yeah. So I suppose here we go. Look, there was the cross that I had to make. This was a little sort of dummy run of it. So I curved those corners, but they could be pointy. So you have a cushion back there. This wasn't pressed very deep, it was just a tryout. But I could have cut these all square and then faced it, and you would have points going on it. With regard to the edge, there are lots of, well, some jewelers, when they do fly pressing, they actually leave some of the edge on, which is also quite a nice thing to do. You don't have to cut right up to the edge. Some people actually make use of the extra metal around it, and you can still solder that together or use it as is, which is quite nice. So you don't have to cut it right out up to there, and it's quite nice because you've still got some of the texture on there. So that's, I know people brooches and things. People, I've seen brooches like that. We've got the flange of the metal part of the design. So it's yeah. So I hope I explained that.
I think what they want to know. I think what they want to know is why the silver is leaf shaped before pressing a leaf shape in the fly press. It could be any shape to make the leaf. Can it be?
Can it be any shape? Well, you will only get out the shape that you. Oh, I see what you mean. So if you cut out a leaf shape out of metal,
Okay.
you have to have a shape behind that you're pushing through, but you could retain the leaf shape, I suppose, on this part here.
I think let's move on. I think let's move on.
Yes, getting very technical. Yes, maybe if somebody wants to, I'm very happy if I've not answered the question fully. If somebody wanted to email me, I'm very happy for people to do that, and then I can explain it more on a one-to-one. It sounds quite a specific request. So if people want to contact me on my page as a contact artist, and I can, I'm happy to talk to them directly if they've got a particular design that they're trying to think of with the fly press. So maybe that would be the best thing on this one. Yeah.
I think a couple of questions are like, we'll take a couple of questions. What solders do you use?
Okay, right. The solders I use, obviously it depends on what I'm working with. I'm working with silver, it's silver solder. I tend to use a lot of hard solder and a little bit of easy. I find that the more jewelry that you make, the more experienced you become with your solders. I don't tend to work sort of hard, medium, easy, because solder comes in different types. You get hard, medium, easy, extra easy, which are different melting points. So hard solder has a very high melting point and extra easy very low. And the idea is for people who aren't jewelers who are tuned into this, is that if you're making a piece with lots of different things happening on it, like on this piece, you would solder on your wires in hard solder, and maybe you'd put the back on in easy solder. And the idea is these wouldn't come off if you were soldering that. So it's different temperatures, so your piece doesn't collapse. But I think the solder that I use most is hard solder, because the more jewelry you make, I'm sure my friends will tell you, or jewelers are saying, the more experienced you become, and pieces are much stronger if they're all done in hard solder. So I tend to use easy solder right at the end for things like earring posts, cufflink backs, that kind of thing. But it's good to try and stick with hard solder because it is a stronger joint, definitely. So I hope that's answered it. I'm getting quite technical in this session. Are there any other questions, Piyush?
There are a couple of technical questions. I think let's take 2 technical questions, and then anything else you want to tell about where you're selling your work, that would be great as well. Sure. So one of the questions is, are the shapes polished on a mop or in a tumbler?
Okay, I tend to, for something for something like these shapes, which have a satinized finish to them, the texture is actually put on there by watercolor paper. And once I've constructed the piece, I suppose the gold probably isn't a good example because that's plated, but something like this, once I've constructed the piece, as anyone knows, when they heat silver, it goes white. So I tend just to rub it really gently with a Gary Flex rubber like this, and that very mats it without taking off the texture. I tend not to use the mops that much for this. I haven't used them for this collection. I tend more to use the rubber and use a burnisher for the sides, which highly polishes the sides. Agate burnisher, great thing to get, guys. Really, really good. Gives you an amazing burnish. So I would use it on something like this. I would have picked out all these edges with the agate burnisher. The surfaces would have been matted with the Gary Flex rubber and the agate burnisher used for the edges, which is it's a great burnisher, an agate one. So I tend to use the polishing mops if I'm doing rings to polish the shank or the main part of the ring. I do use a tumbler sometimes. These beads here on this necklace, I didn't want to matte them. I wanted to keep them slightly shiny to contrast the matte agate beads, and I did put them in the tumbler. Okay, and yeah, big thing about tumbling. If you were tumbling large shapes and they've already got holes pre-drilled, because the tumbling is the last thing you want to do, you've got to wire them up. If you get shot from the tumbler stuck in your beads, you're rattling them for hours to get it out. So just note to self about that. So yeah, so a mixture of both. I tend not to do a lot of highly polished work. I tend to work with textures, and if I polish them, it would obliterate them. So I only highly polish on certain things like rings, as I say. Okay, any other tech?
Let's pick up one last question. Annie, what is the price range of your work, and where can people find your work to buy online?
Yeah, sure. My work varies in price from earrings, which start at about sort of £70, up to necklaces, which are about £400. Pendants. Here's a pendant. Pendants tend to be between £200 and £300. But you can find my work for sale on the Handmade in Britain site. There is a link in my bio on my Instagram page. If you go to Artgems Jewellery, I put a link in today on the bio, and that will lead you straight to the Handmade in Britain page, which has got all these pieces which are for sale. So that's the quickest way to find me, going to my Instagram. Otherwise, on the Handmade, if you go to the Handmade in Britain site and you search for me in the top right-hand corner, Artgems Jewellery, again, my page will come up. Another way you can see my work, if you want to, hopefully we'll do shows again by the end of this year. I'm exhibiting in Handmade in Chelsea, which is in November. So it's in the middle of November. So fingers crossed, we're really hoping it's all going to go through. And hopefully by then it will. And then I will have all this work and far more as well for sale at the Handmade in Chelsea show, which is a great show to come to, which is in Chelsea Town Hall. Very nice venue. So we're all fingers crossing. Oh, Push, it's going to happen. I'm sure it will. So yes, that's where you can find my work for sale.
Fantastic. Before we go, any last words before we end the session?
Just to say thank you all very much for joining me this afternoon. Thank you for Handmade in Britain and Push for hosting the event for me. I hope it's been informative and interesting, and hope it's given to hope you've enjoyed it, and thank you for joining me.
Bye, Annie. Take care. We are going to
Bye.